Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dr. Ben Bocchicchio has been an innovator and leader in the fields of fitness, exercise, and health since the 1970s. Wow. Dr. Ben is the author of 15 Minutes to Fitness, Dr. Ben's Smart Plan for Diet and Total Health. He was awarded degrees in the fields of health and exercise at the undergraduate, master's, doctoral, and postdoctoral levels. Dr. Ben became deeply involved in developing programs for weight reduction, cosmetic enhancement, general fitness, and health and rehabilitation, and has been called on as an expert by professional and college teams, TV, radio, screen, and stage personalities, medical institutions, and corporate entities. Dr. Ben has also been commissioned by a number of teaching hospitals as an exercise physiologist. He has continued his work in the fields of fitness, wellness, and health to this day, and currently maintains a private fitness and health practice in Arizona. This successful business includes weight loss programs that combine prescription medication therapy, nutritional counseling, and supervised exercise. He continues to be a much sought after expert and consultant by corporate and individual clients. Dr. Ben Bocchicchio, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Balanced Body Radio.
Oh, great to be here, Case.
It is an absolute honor to host you. I've gotten to meet you in person now twice. Very soon after this episode comes out, I'll be able to meet you again a third time at the low carbs, or I'm sorry, the Symposium for Metabolic Health in San Diego, which is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
You took the stage at one of my favorite events that I've ever been to with Dave Feldman, who's a client of yours, ironically, at the COSI convention, first time he's ever done it, blew it out of the park. It was absolutely wonderful. One of my highlights, I just have to say, like for as great as your talk was, which was amazing, and I love your content, you told a fantastic joke from the stage. Do you remember the joke that you told about going
Oh,
into the bar with the miniature piano player? Remember that one?
oh, yes, I do remember that joke.
Do you mind indulging the audience? Such a
Yeah,
good
yeah.
one.
Okay, so a guy goes into a bar and he's got this suitcase, puts it on the counter on the bar. Bartender said, "What's that?" He goes, "Ah, it's just something I won." He said, "What do you mean?" So he opens up the suitcase, he takes out this little piano, and this 1 foot tall guy in a tuxedo gets out and commences to playing just beautiful piano. So the guy says, "Well, where'd you get that?" He goes, "I got a bottle in there." A genie. He says, "Yeah, genie." He says, "Yeah, rub the bottle." You ask the genie whatever you want, and they'll give it to you. Guy bartender says, "Okay." He rubs the bottle. He says, "All right, I want $1 million." So next thing you know, there's ducks, little baby ducks, all over the place. The bar, the roof, the parking lot. So the guy says to the bartender, "See, the genie's pretty good." The bartender says, "Yeah, I guess he's good," but he said, "I didn't ask him for $1 million. I asked him for $1 million." And the guy said, "Yeah, that's the only thing with this guy." He said, "You think I asked him for a 12-inch pianist?"
Classic. I love it. I had never heard that one. I'd never heard that one. I died laughing. My dad called me later that day and I told it to him. And I only got through about halfway through. And he was like, "Yeah, the pianist." I'm like, "Oh, come on, dad." That was tremendous. I love that. That was a great job. Like we said in the introduction, my friend, you have been calling balls and strikes since the 1970s. And
Yeah.
man, you've gotten a lot of things right. And over the years, I have learned about your ways of training, not only with nutrition, but also with exercise, and also learned how much scientific validation there is with some of this stuff. It's quite incredible. My question to you is I've been a personal trainer for 17 years, I've been a nutrition coach for 7 8 years. I've been interested in this stuff my entire life. Back behind me I have my nutrition certification and my personal training certification. Neither one mentions either of the things that you specialize on, which is the super slow high intensity type training,
Mhm.
or diets that involve low carbohydrates and high fat, high amounts of protein. Why is it that this stuff is not out there? It makes no sense.
Well, I mean, having been through this now professionally for over 50 years and personally for almost 70 years, but um, I think it's always been around, uh, but it hasn't. A lot of this stuff isn't mainstream. The diet part is because, I mean, there was Stillman, there was Atkins, there was low carb stuff around, and even the bro science of high protein, low carbs for building muscle has been around forever. Uh, but I think the popular theme keeps changing. I always tell people, if you had the best uh, diet plan and you had the best exercise plan and it was really sound physiologically, why would you have to have a new and greatest thing every 6 months for the last 50 years? Because the main reason is number one, a lot of them are flawed. Just basically the design of the plans are flawed. But number two, most people can't stick to doing this stuff. So even if you had the perfect plan, and let's say we have a plan that we hope reaches or approaches pretty perfect, pretty good for everybody, most people can't stick to it because this stuff is behaviorally challenging. It's a little bit uncomfortable, in some cases. And so people just aren't used to that and can't sustain it. It's much easier to sit on the couch and eat something delicious and not do very much because human nature is, if we don't have to, why push ourselves? I mean, I mean, in an ideal situation, food would be abundant. People wouldn't be attacking other people and you wouldn't have to do the things, but our genetics are hardwired into hard physical activity intermittently from periods of scarcity and plentiful that's in regard to nutrients. And so our bodies our genes are hardwired into being able to adapt to those things to the point where they actually need, it seems like, for the highest level of function, they need to be challenged. They need to be sometimes deprived and sometimes overwhelmed. And that's what, the miracle of homeostasis is, being able to handle all these things as they appear. And right now, we don't have to handle them in a modern lifestyle. We don't have to do a damn thing really, and we're protected from predators. We can get all the nutrients we want, all these food we want. Not all about nutrients, and we don't have to do physical activity to survive. So, it's kind of an unnatural, if you want to go to that level, existence. So we have to make behavioral adaptations so that we at least allow our body to do what it's genetically dictated to do to be healthy.
Yeah, that's such a great answer. We live in this world of extreme comfort, right? You don't have to be outside of a temperature range. You don't have to move around very much. You don't even have to drive through the drive-through anymore to grab, again, what you mentioned, very nutrient poor, quote unquote, food. You could just have it delivered to your house and not have to do anything for it. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting world. I would love to start with the fitness piece. And somebody may have heard the introduction where we said you are the author of 15 Minutes to Fitness. 15 minutes to fitness. Okay, well, that sounds a lot like buns of steel in 8 minutes or the 7 minute abs or whatever you want to say. Like, that sounds kind of like a gimmick or whatever. Like, surely your program is more than that. When we're talking about 15 minutes to fitness, can you tell us what you've discovered about how to maximize fitness in, yes, a pretty brief amount of time?
Yeah. Well, just a note to tell you how far back in history I go. The gal who did Buns of Steel, Tammy Lee Webb, she sold, and she had Buns of Steel, Abs of Steel, but Tammy Lee Webb, she sold, I think, 8 million DVDs or CDs,
Wow.
at that, whatever it was at that time. So she's pretty successful.
Wow.
But yeah, you get these things, and when I wrote the book, I didn't title the book. It was just my stuff, and so the publishers really thought that this 15-minute thing was catchy and it was a great title, 15 Minutes to Fitness. And because it was based on the exercise was based on the actual routine that I've created, the super slow, high intensity, twice a week, 15-minute program, which I've personally done for over 50 years. My workouts take me 14 minutes, just about exactly, twice a week, and I've been doing that for 52 years, something like that. Anyway, the point is,
Unbelievable.
if you understand what you are trying to accomplish with eating and with exercise, and then slash activity, which are two separate and distinct disciplines, then you know that you're. And I'm a big signals and pathways guy. Everything that we do behaviorally and even pharmaceutically, okay, is an attempt to direct metabolic signals, chemical signals, and pathways that follow towards driving a healthy homeostasis, okay? A healthy, carefree, youthful, vigorous, long lifestyle kind of a process. And so if you understand what those processes and what those pathways are, then you can deduce how you can get there most effectively, efficiently, safely, and consistently, right? I mean, That to me is the whole plan of metabolic health. Okay, so now we take those constraints, or we take those uh, uh, facets of health and chemistry and biochemistry. I would say, how do I induce those? Okay. Now, if you ever see any of my talks, you'll always see a muscle fiber chart. Okay. Because I think with that muscle fiber chart, you can probably deduce every aspect of exercise, from energy used to the metabolites created, to the energy dissipated, to the chemistry stimulated and instigated. All of those things have to do with, in exercise, have to do with specific muscle fiber recruitment patterns. And what does that mean? How do we tax the muscles with regard to frequency, how often, duration, for how long a period of time, intensity, at what level of muscle demand, and style, a little bit mechanically. How do you do these things within those constraints, or within those definitions? So basically, what I try to do, because I was brought up in the conventional, lifting, and the 3 sets of 10, and as a wise ass kind of graduate student, they would always say 3 sets of 10, and the last 3 repetitions of the third set are the ones that really count. So I would say, if that's the case, then what's the purpose of the first 27 reps? What the hell are we doing those for if the last 3 count? So it seemed kind of logical to me that the last 3 count, and they were the hardest ones. Why wouldn't we do the last 3 first, when we're strong and capable of taxing the muscle at a high level, as opposed to having pre-fatigued it with these 27 repetitions until we get to this point of failure? If I ask you to run a 100-yard dash as fast as you can, I'm not going to say, but first I want you to, run a mile or two, and then we'll do a 100-yard dash. No, if you're really trying to work at a high intensity, okay, and that's another thing, Casey. High intensity. The talk that I'm going to give in San Diego in 3 or 4 weeks, whatever it is all about the different pathways that the muscle system stimulates directly towards the reduction, the oxidation, okay, the mobilization of fat. Because what gets in my craw is when people say you can't outrun a bad diet. Well, that's stupid to me. I say, well, you can't outrun, you can't outthink a bench press. I mean, what it means nothing. It's like saying, sometimes the sky is blue. Well, okay, we know if you eat this horrible diet, it's very difficult to exercise enough to offset that. You can. It's very ridiculous, and it's a stupid plan. But the point is, the problem with that statement is that it tells people that exercise is not a good modality for reducing fat, reducing weight, changing body composition. That's ridiculous. I mean, it's so what I did in this talk that I'm about, this is like a preview here for you guys, is that I took 12 different mechanisms by which muscles specifically and directly talk or communicate with fat cells in order that they upregulate their oxidation and release, okay, which means burning fat, drawing fat out of storage, okay, which is, fatty acid uh, um, upregulation, and then using the fat as fuel, which is oxidation. Those are 2 different things, but whatever. Okay, so I've said, and I cited in every one of those elements, those 12 elements that I present, the literature. Okay, and the literature is abundant. So the literature shows us that muscles are a powerful influencer of fat oxidation, reduction, storage, hormonal influence, things like that, in and of itself. Now, combined synergistically with a diet that stimulates some of these pathways together with the synergistic combination, to me, is incredibly powerful. And I would think it is irresponsible not to use both. And that's what annoys me a little bit about just do this gut diet, just do this, when you have this, at least half of this formula hanging out there. For the most sedentary person on the planet, okay, the most limited person, you can still instigate a high intensity muscle response. For example, if I take a 400-pound guy who's diabetic and has been obese for 30 years, and you say, how can you do high intensity exercises with this person? I say, Simple. It's easy because I can get to the high intensity, fast twitch glycolytic fibers easily because this guy's capacity, if I have him do a 10-degree wall seat and he can hold it for 10 seconds, he has probably instigated some high intensity motor unit recruitment because he's so limited. Anything is going to make him. I mean, and so I can give this sedentary person 3 or 4 exercises that to you and me will seem like falling off a log. To this guy, it's high intensity work. May even be that walking 100 yards may be high intensity to him. But high intensity has to do with muscle fiber recruitment patterns, not difficulty, not uh, raising a heart rate to a certain level. It may be all of those things or each of those things, but the real definition of high intensity productive exercise is muscle fiber recruitment pattern. Which muscle fibers am I taking to a point of momentary failure?
That is wonderfully explained. Now is probably a perfect time, since we've used the word several times, to define exercise. I think this is so critical, and it's the reason why I want to stop all the people that run by me in the morning when I'm out on my morning walk. They're all running and huffing and puffing, and I don't know their goals, so I can't judge them. But I guarantee you, more often than not, if I asked them what they were training for, probably most of them would say, "I want to lose weight." What they really mean is they probably want to lose fat, and they're doing what they think is accomplishing that mission, and it's not doing it. Can you explain how you define exercise?
I define exercise as a formal, planned system of muscle fiber recruitment that instigates a threshold level, which means a level at which the muscles and the system therefore has to respond at a threshold level. Okay, so this is a structured, intermittent, high, what we call high intensity level of stimulation. Now, there are lower levels of stimulation, but the higher level of stimulation that we go to, the higher level of muscle fiber recruitment, the literature shows across the board that the higher the level of muscle fiber recruitment, the higher level of response, whether it be in myokine signaling, whether it be in fat oxidation, whether it be uh, hypertrophy, protein synthesis, all of the things that are good for building muscle and increasing metabolic rate and power and mitochondrial stimulation. That's a whole nother topic right there. So, okay. Now, activity, on the other hand, is less structured, informal, maybe sports training, maybe recreational. Can you derive metabolic benefits from activity? Absolutely. The problem is you don't know what, if you're training for a performance, that to me is now sports training. And some of that could qualify as exercise, but it's more randomized, it's less controlled, and therefore we're not exactly sure what metabolic pathways we're instigating and what the responses might be to those.
Okay, perfect. I love the definition. So, how could you explain to that person who's out running around, their body shape is never changing? I mean, I've lived here for a long time. Like they
Yeah.
never look any different. I see them all the time. How would you explain to that person like what you're doing is not going to cause you the result you want? This is what's actually going to happen. Can you explain what they're actually causing by doing that every day?
I would assume, I think reasonably, that these people are trying to reduce body fat. They're trying to burn fat, okay, which is a general, bro science term, but okay, it makes sense. At least intellectually, you can understand it. They're trying to burn fat, and they are told that burning fat is done at a lower level of taxation of the muscle fiber. So something that's slow and enduring and takes quite a long length of time. Just as an aside, and not to backtrack on this, Casey, you might be very interested. You know who Vinny Tortorich is?
Of course, yeah. We just hosted
Right.
him a few weeks ago. He's great.
Okay. So I know Vinny pretty well, and he's a zone two guy because he has Paul Montefort and some really good guys. Okay. And Indigo San Milan is, and these guys are really good, and they're devotees, Peter Attia, they're devotees of zone two training. Okay. I think they are misinformed, and they're brilliant guys and nice guys and quote experts, super experts. Okay, Zone training is training at which you are not making a deep inroad into your recovery. In other words, you can sustain this. This is steady state activity. Just by definition, steady state activity means it will make the least imposition on your metabolic performance. The reason you can sustain it for a very long period of time is because it's not really doing anything that's taxing. It's not doing anything. It's using fuel at a low level that can be reabsorbed and reinforced. So you are utilizing fat as fuel. There's no question about it. But you are not making any inroads into an adaptation process. Once you stop, what has happened is you've decreased your fat, available energy. You become a little bit hungry to replace that energy. And when you replace it, you've done nothing to instigate muscle growth, protein synthesis. When I say nothing, at a very reasonable low level, you've done nothing to stimulate processes that instigate muscle response, metabolic activity, glycogen storage, or any of these other things that are very productive for metabolic health. And so, yeah, and actually, you have given your body a lot of mechanical work from which to have to recover, and in the long run, probably reduce muscle mass, muscle activity, and even mitochondrial power, in my opinion. Okay, so given that, I think, and so when I mentioned Vinny Tortorich, I asked him if he would mind kind of emceeing a debate with myself and Marty Gabala. You know who Martin Gabala is?
No, I don't.
Marty is the science guy for interval training. He's got a book called One Minute Workout, I think it is. Okay, and he cites all of the studies from 30-second to 4-minute interval training protocols that have been published in peer-reviewed journals showing how they are at least as effective, if not more effective, for utilizing fat for VO2 max increase and all this other stuff. Okay, and then I'm going to get Vinny and maybe Paul Montefort. I don't think we can get Shannon to go, but anyway, and Zone 2 guys, and have a real discussion about what is the best way, what is the most feasible way for us to improve VO2 max, and regardless of strength, which of course high intensity training is going to improve in spades. But the two most important factors for longevity across the board, it's not diabetes, it's not smoking, it's not overweight, is muscle strength and VO2 max. Okay, those two things, if you can improve upon them, are 80% of the most expensive, high-end, $15,000 a month, crazy supplement, concierge doctor, longevity programs that you can manage. Improve your muscle strength, improve your VO2 max. If, again, muscle strength is the #1 component correlative to longevity. If you are in the top third for your age and gender and muscle strength alone, you are 40% less likely to die of cancer and 40% more likely to live to be 100. Stop. End. Okay, that's a fact. And
Wow.
VO2 max is right up there.
Wow.
So how can I now, now to me, longevity, all longevity is maintaining health for an enduring period of time, right? For a long time. I mean, that's what longevity is. Okay, so let's go into the human psyche, behavioral psyche. Do people like to exercise? No, I don't give a shit who you are. Okay, you may, like you may like to push yourself. You may like to do this. Okay, the reason that Ozempic is really, a very productive and popular drug is because you don't have to do anything. You take the drug, it stops you from eating. You're not hungry, and so you lose weight. Okay, but there is no such pill for exercise. Okay, there isn't. You can, take some supplements and increase your responses a little bit, but there is so what I tried to do when I first did this program with it's called Smart Training now. It wasn't called anything. It was just Dr. Ben's thing. Was I tried to make exercise as productive as possible. So I tried to take out all the chafe, whatever wasn't part of the productivity. I wanted to take it out and just get right to the productive stuff. So what I discovered pretty quickly is that the volume of work, the mechanical work, number of sets and reps that you did, could not be a very important factor, because when I reduced the mechanical work, say from 3 sets of 10 to 3 exercises for your biceps, okay, 90 reps, if I reduced it down to 3 or 4 reps and got better results, or at least as good a result. So I reduced the mechanical work by 90% or more, and I got the same results. So I had to just logically conclude the volume of work had nothing to do with the basic benefit, the basic strengthening, the basic metabolic level of muscle activity. So I reduced it down. And now, how do you do that? You reduce it down because the higher the intensity, the lower the duration. Okay. The lower you can sustain it. That makes sense. If I ask you to sprint, you ain't going a mile. Okay. So when I did that, I said, how can I get to this high intensity level without this enormous amount of fatigue, which actually reduces the intensity really after the fact, maybe a little counterintuitive, but the more you do, the less you can work hard. Okay. So I reduced the exercise amount to minimal. Okay. There's a minimal, I think, mechanical requirement, which is why isometric exercise has some benefit, but it does not have the minimal mechanical elements involved, who I think to be the highest level of productivity. Okay, so now we reduce this down. How do I do high intensity in a very short period of time? Well, conventionally, we use these enormously heavy weights. We did very few reps. We tried to explode because we couldn't lift the weights in controlled fashion. And it was successful metabolically, but mechanically, it was disastrous. It's an easy way to get hurt. So I said, what if I take out the mechanical negativity of explosive work? What if I just load the muscle for a certain length of time, working as hard as it can, recruiting as high a level of muscle fiber recruitment as possible by slowing down, by reducing the kinetic energy, the momentum? And that's what I did. And so now what we have is a system that adheres to the physiological parameters, that just basic muscle physiology. A muscle can work hard for about 30 to 90 seconds, depending on a number of variables. Within that time, if I can reach mechanical failure, then externally, that mechanical failure correlates to the metabolic threshold of productivity. That's it in a nutshell. So how do I reach the metabolic threshold to produce an upward adaptation? And how do I identify it mechanically? Very slow training with a weight that creates muscle fatigue, really muscle failure, in 30 to 90 seconds, depending on the mechanic. I mean, that's how it is, and that's how this thing developed. Okay, and that's what we do. And we found that we make all of the inroads that we can. Then you've heard of high intensity interval training, right? So,
Yes.
so high intensity interval training to me is a misnomer, because if you're doing high intensity exercise, remember, if you're recruiting muscles at that level to failure, then it must be interval in nature. You cannot sustain high intensity training. So it has to be interval in nature. Now, that's good. And there are plenty of good studies that show if you go on a treadmill and you do a 20-second sprint and then a 40-second walk, and it's okay, this is interval training on a treadmill or on an elliptical machine or anything else. That's all well and good. And you get great results from that, really good results. Okay. But me being kind of a wise guy, questioning guy, I said, you know, again, you're doing 10 of these intervals. By the fifth, sixth interval, if you're working really hard like that, and you are going to sprint as fast as you can, and it is hard as hell and it is demanding. I said, but how capable are these muscles that have just done the same elliptical move or sprinting move on a treadmill? How capable are they of taxing these high intensity fibers after the fifth or sixth interval that they've just done the same thing acquiring? I said, I don't think so. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not hard. It doesn't mean that it's not demanding, but it means to me that it's not recruiting those muscle fibers at the level that we want to recruit them. Globally, it's taxing your respiratory system, your vascular system. Okay, I got that. But how about this? How about doing each one of my high intensity intervals with a fresh set of muscles for each interval, each muscle group being capable of working at a very high maximum intensity, and then going to the next exercise. So for example, here's my high intensity interval training: quads, hamstrings, lats, shoulders, pecs, bis, tris. Okay. Each one of those at the local level is working as hard as it can, recruiting type 2 muscle fibers like a mother, okay? But my next interval is done with a fresh set of muscles, also capable of stimulating my support systems, my respiratory system, my cardiovascular system, my nervous system, okay, my endocrine system, driving that as hard as it can, driving that response and support as hard as it can. But at the local level of that working set of muscles, fresh in each interval, I am working as hard as possible, stimulating a threshold level of muscle response. So now locally and globally, I am getting this enormous benefit, and it's very efficient. And my VO2 max will go through the roof. My muscle strength will go through the roof, so much so that I can't do this on a daily basis. Now, think about the developing human. If we had to take down a mastodon every friggin' day, okay, we would be exhausted after 3 days and we'd be dead, okay, because the thing would trample us. We probably went on this big hunt, tracked the animal, ran after it, pulled it down, butchered it, pulled the meat back. Okay, vigorous, brutal hard work, and we ate for 3 days or so, and then we had to go out and do it again. I think that intermittency is also genetically hardwired into our physiology. So this twice a week allowing for recovery system that I have seems to work perfectly. Twice a week, high intensity. Okay, rest, not rest sedentary. Rest, don't do that again. You got to walk. We also walked 5, 6, 10 miles a day as humans. Okay, that's so we were active, but we were not vigorously active unless we needed to run away from a predator or we needed to go and get food somehow. Okay, and I think a little bit of that. Now that may be me deducing history or development of the species to my advantage, but it seems to make sense. You know. Anyway, so that's where we're at. So exercise is intense, it's focused, it's brief, it's intermittent to be mostly productive, and in the interim, activity can be addressed on a daily basis. You can walk, you can do recreation, you can train for a sport, but you can't interfere with your recovery from this high intensity exercise. You have to allow it to happen. That takes about 2 or 3 days. Okay, so if there wasn't such thing as a week, I would have to have created it to train twice a week with 2 days off in between, and then 3 days off in the other workout, and it's worked out phenomenally well.
That's amazing. If anybody were to truly understand what you just said, they understand all the principles of fitness and they wouldn't need bums like me to train them on a day-to-day basis. Like that is so well said. I want to take an aside here based on something you said, which I thought was super interesting. So I hope you forgive me for this. But I think it's interesting. I think it's relevant to the next question that I asked. You
Yes,
mentioned the two best markers for longevity is VO2 max and overall strength.
that's what.
Most of
Yeah,
us are pretty aware of the VO2 max research and does say that your VO2 max is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, contributing factor to tell you about longevity. Now, I told you offline that I spent my career working on metabolic carts, and so I was measuring VO2 max on people for over a decade. That's what
right.
my whole thing. So the formula, I would always get confused when I was training another trainer. I would always not confused. I would get frustrated when I was training another trainer and they would try to explain the formula of what VO2 max is. And they would say VO2 max is a milliliters of oxygen that you could take in every single minute. And then they would stop. And I would wait for them to finish the formula. What they were describing what is called absolute VO2, but the number that most of us see is called relative VO2, which is also take that formula, divide it by your body weight.
Okay.
Now you get a number that's based on your body weight. So I always wondered if the VO2 longevity data was skewed in a way that, like, if you were 400 pounds, it doesn't matter what your aerobic capacity would be, your VO2 max would be so much lower just because it's a weight based number. And so I almost put a little bit more weight into the strength aspect of things because yeah, you're assuming that most people who age well are of a certain weight and they're a healthy weight, regardless of what that is, and maybe they have different lung capacities and can improve that. But I always thought it was really interesting that most people forgot about the weight portion of the VO2 max and how that affects that number.
Yeah. No. Okay. I mean, it is. Don't forget, it's a population average or population number view of things. Okay, and you can have somebody with a VO2 max of 52. Okay, or you can have somebody with a VO2 max of 42, and it's a standard deviation different, and they can both be perfectly healthy. In other words, at some point, if you're in the top 25% for strength, being in the top 2% doesn't mean that you have such an unlimited advantage,
Right.
metabolically and health wise and for longevity. Same thing, because I know I've heard Peter Attia, and I know Pete pretty well, say, boy, if you're at 75 percentile, that's great, but if you're at 95, you'll never die. I mean, that to me, that's just
Right.
here's what happens with some of our experts, smart guys, done the research and all this stuff. I think they can't get out of the rabbit hole of them training endurance athletes. I think they come from a biased perspective. The difference between training a Tour de France cyclist and his VO2 max and his zone 2 and building a base and all this other stuff has very little to do with training somebody for metabolic health. Okay. It's like me saying the only thing that could possibly matter is how explosive you are and how much weight you can lift off the ground. And the more you can, the better. That's bullshit. It's not applicable. It doesn't make sense. Okay.
Yep.
So at some point, I think we become skewed because I heard somebody ask, I think San Milan, I do 4 hours of zone 2 training a week. Is that enough? And he said, not really. So I said, I like the guy. He's a smart and nice, nice man. Really, what is he talking? Who's he talking to? 4 hours of that training is not enough. Well, if it's not enough, it's not feasible. I'm sorry. What are you going to have? Most people do 6 hours of zone 2 training. This is something. This is a prescription someone's going to swallow. No effing way. Okay. So I'm telling these people, I can get you there. Okay, substantially there twice a week in 15 minutes. Now, do I want you to be sedentary? Of course not. That's the activity part. I want you to be active, but I need you to be. This is an absolute requirement to do this high intensity muscle training, resistance training twice a week. There is no substitute. I don't care if you run 87,000 miles a day. I don't care if you never sleep. Okay, you cannot produce the metabolic benefits, the metabolic pathways, the chemistry necessary to provide these advantages, these physiological potentials any other way. Okay.
Yep.
Now, can you go and Ken Berry's a good guy. I like Ken Berry. I call him kind of like Huckleberry Ken because his whole thing is I take an axe, I chop down all the trees in my neighborhood, I haul the trees. That's plenty of muscle activity. Well, he may be right, probably not. But anyway, who the hell has trees in the first place? Is going to haul these things? I'm saying, Ken, I'm trying to give a prescription here that's behaviorally palatable. Okay, can you do this, and can you do it for the rest of your life? And I have people that have done my program for now 50 years, 40 years, 30 years, and they keep doing it. Okay, that's nice. To me, that's very rewarding. Okay, so I'm trying. Are there other ways to get to a place that I want to get to? Absolutely and obviously. This is not the only way in the world to do this. It's pretty obvious. There are plenty of fit people who do stuff never heard of Dr. Ben or his system. I got it. That's fine. I'm not the Messiah. But I am presenting, I think, a palatable, reasonable way, and I will put it up to any system with regard to this evaluation: safety, efficiency, effectiveness, long-term adherence. Okay. I put it up against anything, and I think it holds pretty well.
Yep.
And that's how I measure the effectiveness of a fitness program.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so glad you brought him up again as well. Ignacio, or I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Stamilon, is that his name? Ignacio Stamilon.
yeah,
Okay. And my second point I wanted to make, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but he was formerly the coach of Tadej Pogacar, who
yeah,
had won the Tour de France twice. In the last 2 years, he'd been the runner-up, so he didn't win. He took second place. This
yeah,
last year, Tadej actually fired him and hired a new coach, and they stopped doing as much of the Zone 2 stuff as he was doing before, and they moved to do higher intensity intervals, and he was doing more and more and more of them. Tadej Pogacar just won the Giro d'Italia by almost 10 minutes. He killed everybody. Then a few weeks later went to the Tour de France, which just concluded. He
yeah,
won 6 stages. He won by minutes. It was like 6 or 7 minutes on the second place guy. He won the last 3 stages in a row, which were a mountaintop, and a time trial. He killed them all. And one of the big things he changed was his training style. He did more intervals and stopped doing as much zone two. Anecdotal, I'm sure there's other things he changed, but I thought you would really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, I didn't know that specifically. It doesn't surprise me at all. Now, and again, I think you he would Indigo has to get out of the mindset, and Peter, because Peter's a long distance swimmer and cyclist and all that stuff, of training and getting this higher and higher level of adaptation, specifically for what it is that they're trying to perform. Now, performance training is different than metabolic health training. I mean, I'm sorry, and if you use your bias to exclude other options. I mean, we all have a bias, but if you can understand what your bias is and try to put that into the soup, into the formula, I think you're a better provider of information than if you can't get out of that cave.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
anyway, interesting to know. But again, there's Marty's book, Jabala's book, 1 minute to 1 minute to fitness or whatever. What the hell is it? Anyway, it's Marty Jabal, Gibala. He's up in McMaster, one of the Canadian places. Nicest guy, smart as hell, very respectful. I'm going to try to get he and I on the side of interval training and maybe get a couple of the. I mean, I hear this stuff, Casey. I hear, well, we're going to build this broad base because the broader the base, the higher the peak. So again, I'm a wise guy Italian from New York. I said, okay, how about this? The higher the peak, the broader the base. I'm working on the peak. Okay, why not? Who's going
I
to tell
love
me
it.
no? I mean, so you know, hopefully this is helpful to more people than not. Not just an exclusive group. Have I trained world class athletes? Absolutely. World record holders? Absolutely. Olympic gold medal? Yeah. MVPs in the pro sport? Yes, I've trained them all. Okay, I understand. Now that becomes specific sports training. But I still do my basic high intensity training as a base. That's
Yep,
my
and I couldn't agree more. And like I used to do very different things for all of my clients. Here's a hockey player. We're going to train him like hockey in the gym, jumping around and swinging things. Or,
yeah,
this kid plays football, so we'll do football like things. And like as my career has gone, yes, there might be some differences on how I train people, but I am not vastly differently training an 85-year-old and a 15-year-old and a 40-year-old mom and a 55-year-old business professional. There are
yeah,
differences, but there's not many differences. And everything that you said about the signal, getting to the point of a deep level of fatigue safely and effectively helps everybody across the board. And it's not just with muscle. Yes, you can add muscle, you maintain muscle, but your connective tissue is stronger. Your bones are way stronger. Like there's so many other benefits. And then we have, the cohort of people that might be saying, well, I know I need to do my quote unquote cardio
mhm,
because that's good for my heart. And you look back on how we even came to call cardio is really interesting.
yeah,
And like you just explained, you said it yourself. Like there's so many cardiovascular benefits to doing high intensity training, doing strength training safely. It's amazing.
yeah. I mean, I did a study. I was the head uh, investigator in a study where we did 100 subjects. This was published in a journal for American College of Sports Medicine and American Physiological Society. In any case, had a group of 50 that did. It turned out to be 3 hours and 20 minutes of zone two training a week. And we had another group that did two 15-minute high intensity interval training by Smart System. Okay. The zone two people improved in 6 weeks, improved their VO2 max by 11%, which was good. The people who did the smart training for 6 weeks, 15 minutes twice a week, improved their VO2 max by 33%. Okay, so but anyway, I mean, since you've done a lot of this, respiratory quotient stuff, which I think is another thing. I think respiratory quotient is something we should measure in everybody.
Fascinating.
If you're on a fat loss program, Casey, wouldn't it seem to you logical that if we measure your RQ, we should improve your RQ towards a fat burning, the fat burning needle? Because isn't that what we're trying to do? Is to burn more fat? So
Absolutely.
why resting RQ is not uh, utilized to me is silly, but that's maybe going down a different path. But so my point is, um, so I think VO2 max is not a global response test. I think it's a test of the working muscle's ability to extract and utilize oxygen and instigating mitochondrial support for that. Okay, I think it works because there are there are a number of studies that show if I exercise one leg and I measure VO2 max, I increase the hell out of it. Okay, in that, but if I measure the other leg, okay, and if I'm supposed to get this global response and I get no increase in oxygen uptake, then I'm telling you, it's a local phenomenon more than I think a global. If I
Great
train
point.
somebody, okay, I mean, I would get these guys in the old days in New York. They were policemen, firemen, had to take tests, and they give them basically a Bruce protocol, a treadmill elevated gradual elevation test. So, and I said, and these guys were smokers and drinkers. They weren't going to go out and do zone two, any kind of shit. So I had them do my thing like twice a week, right? Got them a lot stronger. And I said, you go on a treadmill once a week and you practice walking on it at an incline, just so you get used to it kinesiologically, get used to the skill at least of it. And maybe they walked, 10 minutes once a week or whatever. They beat the hell out of those VO2 max tests, okay? Those Bruce protocol tests. And all they really did was what's considered strength training. But strength training, when you're talking about taxing muscles at that level, what are we talking about? Why is muscle strength such a vital criteria for longevity? Because if you can demonstrate this level of strength in a strength test, what does it show us? It shows us that all of the support systems, the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system, the hormone system, the nervous system, have to be working at a high level in order to support and meet that demand. Without the demand of the muscle system, those systems wouldn't have to do squat. It's the muscle system that drives the support of those systems that we measure as being maybe more heart related. But your heart has to respond to this level of taxation, biochemically, hormonally, respiratorily. I mean, all those things are being taxed at their maximal level when we do this high intensity training.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. I wish more people would understand that and understand that it is still good for their heart doing these other things. You think you need to go out and pound the pavement to be able to get there, and you absolutely don't. So, okay, I love that. You mentioned the exercises earlier, or at least the muscle groups you mentioned. I do want to
Yeah.
ask you about which exercises you prefer. You mentioned the muscle groups, and one thing I noticed, it's the way I would do things as well, is that there was a certain order you listed them in, and you went from more kind of multi-joint exercises where the muscles were more found in the middle part of the body to kind of tapering away to the periphery of the body and more single joint exercises. Is that on purpose? I would think to do the same
Well,
thing where you'd want to exhaust the glutes and quads and everything first.
as far as the multiple joint and the single joint, that really has to do with the equipment available. Okay, but the basic premise is to work the largest muscle groups first because they are the most demanding of these support groups. Okay, in other words, if I tried to do my legs last and I did my shoulders and chest and arms first, I would be now globally a little bit taxed, no question. But when I really needed this highest global input, I would be a little bit lax. So I work the largest muscles first, because don't forget, one of the things that I kind of emphasize is there are local and global effects of exercise, and we're trying to capture both of those categories of benefit. So I think and again, this is my opinion, and I've seen it in real action, I think, over 50 years, supported by that if you work the larger muscles first, you can maintain this taxation, okay, this central or global response more readily than if we start with the smaller muscles and then try to go to the larger muscles at the end. So my whole system case is to try to get every ounce of benefit that I can, every advantage, stack the deck in my favor as much as I can. And one of them is large to small muscles. Now, with regard to multiple joint and single joint, theoretically, if we really want to get a high intensity stimulation of what I did basically was I took all of what I considered the major muscle groups in their primary functions and tried to get the most beneficial exercise I could with the available equipment or apparatus that I have. because it depends on what I have to work with. But theoretically, if I had every joint in our body produces an arc from our finger to our knee to our hips. We move in an arc. Okay. Almost all the equipment that we use is linear. It's gravitational. Okay. So now we get into, and I don't know how much in the weeds you want to get into this, but now we get into trying to match the resistance curve of the apparatus to the strength curve of the exerciser. Okay. That now takes some expertise, takes a little bit of nuance, there's a little art to the science, you know. So if I had available a rotary machine, a rotary movement, in other words, if the benefit of Nautilus, for example, is if you do a curl, okay, a bicep curl, when you flex the arm, okay, you have a lot of torque at the beginning. That's why it's very difficult. Okay, if you're on a horizontal plane, if you're on a vertical plane standing up, there's almost no benefit for the first 6 or 8 inches, because when we use a gravitational, a barbell, or a dumbbell, the only distance that really matters is the vertical distance. In other words, if I come up with a curl 6 inches, but I've raised it vertically 1 inch, I've really been 1/6 productive. Okay. Now, when I get right to the middle, when I'm lifting directly up and I move up an inch, I've got an inch of verticality. That's tough. Plus, we have levers to incorporate things like that. But so what the advanced, I think, thinking trainer would try to do is match the strength curve to the resistance curve of the apparatus and be cognizant of that throughout the range of motion. That's another thing. I'm a big proponent of full range of motion. Now, I've trained Mr. Olympias, okay, and trained with them, okay. They don't do all of these things, although I had them do a basic training. But then you start to talk about a number of things. When you start to get into that, again, to me, that's just super physiological performance goals. Then we're starting to talk about blood delivery, pumping action, constant protein ingestion. I mean, we are now working at a super physiologic. So even when guys like, and Ted Naiman is a guy I love. I think Ted's such a logical dude, but he's a newbie to resistance training. Okay. And he's also a hard gainer, and he's also an ectomorph. Okay. So
True.
he has his own theories, and I respect the hell out of that guy. I like that guy. Anyway, my point is, if you start to look at bodybuilders, or you start to look at Tour de France cyclists, you know, or marathon runners, I say the bifurcation of health benefit and performance at a very ordinary level starts to go different ways. They just, you know, this is good for performance. It's not good for metabolic health. This is good for metabolic health, but for performance, it's mediocre. Okay. So if you can, in your mind, separate those two things, um, and again, we know now the most high level performers in these elite kind of competitions are not the healthiest people in the world at all.
That's
Okay.
right.
So, but they're admirable, and they're motivational and all that, but understand that the mechanics of what they're doing and the physiology of what they're trying to become good at being compromised. They're trying to overcome almost a sickness, you know, taking these demands to a level where if I did your blood work, I'd say, you know, why don't we get you into the hospital for a couple of days because your numbers are all fucked up. Okay. You're not healthy, but
Yep.
that's what's required to push your body to that level. So
Right.
people, a little bit, that's why I say these guys who train these people can't get that out of their head. This guy did much more, and now he's able to, he's able to pedal at 2.5 miles per hour faster up a hill than this other guy. That's good for that. It doesn't mean, it may mean that he's just taxing the hell out of his mitochondria. And I don't even let me get into mitochondria because I can explain to you why I think we can train mitochondria almost in a correlative trajectory as we can muscles. I think we can train mitochondria, and mitochondria can be trained and developed into different shapes, into different geographic positions by the muscle demand. I think most exclusively, and that's a whole nother thing. But we'll get into that another time. But so I mean, I've looked into this stuff a little bit. I study it a lot because I don't have much else to do. I've never, I've always been lucky enough. I don't have to work a lot. I just like to work enough to, have a comfortable lifestyle and enjoy myself. So, I mean,
Oh
I'm
man.
doing this for 51 years and I still like to do it. So,
Yeah, you're pretty good at it too. I must
yeah,
say that was another really great
I'm getting the hang
explanation.
of it.
You're doing okay. Not bad for your first day. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm very fortunate. The training facility that I use with myself with my clients is a facility that has some of the machines you're talking about, cams that are shaped differently that you can manipulate, or machines that have arcs where you can load the beginning
What's
phase.
the name of that equipment where you can
Uh,
manipulate the cam? Do you
there's
remember?
there's many different the guy who runs it, his name's John. The place is called the Refinery. He is a aficionado for machines, and so there's a, it must be 45 years old, a super pullover Nautilus
Oh,
machine that works on chains. There's
great
like the
machine.
diverging rows where you can, again, you manipulate exactly where the cam is hitting, so you can
Yeah,
choose where you're
that's the
getting
kind of
manipulation.
equipment I used that in PT. Oh God, 40 years ago, and I can't remember the name of the company. You could change where it changed the torque basically position.
Yep.
So you could, okay, oh, those were great, and I can't
Oh,
remember the name of the damn thing. Anyway, no, but that's, yeah. Now you're starting to understand what I'm talking about. And again, here's the thing too, Casey. If you become zealous with this stuff, oh, I think the Nautilus. First of all, that Nautilus pullover machine to me was like a rocket ship. I mean, it was the difference between a carriage and a jet plane. But the point is, um, if you can get good equipment and know how to use it to your advantage, it's wonderful. But I've gotten ridiculously good results with resistance bands with people on Zoom. I mean, it's like I never thought I would say that, but so just because you have a Ferrari doesn't mean you're a race car driver. You have to know how to use the tools, and you have to understand what you're trying to get from these tools. Right? How to take advantage. There's some advantages, there's some disadvantages. And that's kind of cool, nuanced stuff that I keep kind of learning as new stuff comes across, but still comes down to the basic. How can I maintain this muscle demand for a certain period of time without having, now, even the difference between a positive and a negative, don't forget, a positive is much more demanding relatively than a negative. It has to be. Okay, because mechanically you have mechanical friction, you've got muscle friction, you've got to if it's 100 pounds, you've got to apply more than 100 pounds of force. On a negative, you have to apply less than 100 pounds of force. Plus, you have friction helping you. So, understanding the diversity, and any machine that can provide you as little difference between a positive and negative is beneficial. Okay, but so now we're getting into nuance, and maybe we're getting away from something you want to talk about. But I could go into those. I could do an hour and a half with you about the rep, what a rep entails, all the different things one repetition entails. Okay, but that's, who cares? Uh, I don't want to go there
well,
unless some.
that's fine. You just answered the question perfectly that I was going to ask you. Like, yeah, if you were here and I was here and we go to this gym and I could, show a client some of these moves on these great machines, awesome, that's great. But the question I was going to ask is equally, have you found what I found, that you could work? I work with people I've never met in person through Zoom. They go to Amazon and buy a $30 set of bands, and they can
Yep.
be quite thick. And you know what? Is it the most ideal? No, but you can get an amazing workout. And you just said you could do the exact same thing. I could not agree more. I love it.
Well, did you ever see? I'm sure you must have. Go to Low Carb USA and you go Doug Reynolds, Dr. Ben resistance workout.
I
Okay,
I, I saw you do it for sure, but I'm going to link that video.
okay. You look at me training Doug Reynolds. That son of a gun is strong, and I put him through a workout that would kill a horse, okay, with bands. And I think it took us 11 and a half minutes, his whole body,
Wow. Yep.
okay. I don't show many people that because it scares them. If I say, watch me what I do with this guy, and the people are just starting to go, oh my God, I can't do that.
Yeah.
We did that workout for Arthur Agustin. You know who Arthur is? He's the Agustin score
Yeah.
cardiologist,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
South Beach diet guy. Well, Arthur and I are pretty good friends, old buddies, and we took Doug to his office after Boca 2 years ago, the Boca meeting. And what we did was we noticed that at the end of this workout that I do, you'd be interested in this. Every time I measure RQ before I do a smart training session, every time, and then I measure it 8 to 15 minutes after, my RQ drops towards fat burning every time from every position. So now what's going on? Okay, you would know this because you work with the metabolic part, but almost nobody knows this case, okay? When you work this hard at this high intensity, this muscle fiber recruitment level for this whole workout, okay, you are burning glycogen at a threatening level. In other words, you are depleting glycogen to the point where your nervous system, your brain is responding and saying, hey, this glycogen is my fight or flight, life or death fuel. I am depleting it like a mofo. Okay. What the hell's going on? So, what does it do? It releases fat from fat cells, okay, into free fatty acids. So, it has a backup fuel to try to assuage this impending catastrophe of running out of glycogen. So now you've got free fatty acids circulating like a mother. But in the interim, once I stop this workout, once I stop this routine, I have utilized so much glycogen that my bloodstream now is loaded with glucose, okay? And my blood sugar is up significantly. Doug, I think, is normally around 85. His blood sugar went up to, I think, 190 or 200, okay?
Sure.
So what happens? Okay, what happens is once that clears, these free fatty acids that have been from the adrenaline surge have been released from fat cells are still circulating, and that's when you have this continued resting metabolic rate that's elevated from this kind of high intensity exercise. That's when you're burning fat, not when you're burning fat, 2 grams a minute doing slow stuff and then you just replenish it constantly. Okay, so you're making no inroads. Okay, but that's when you start to utilize fat. You raise your oxidation levels. You increase AMPK, which now allows blood glucose to go back into glycogen in the muscles without the support of insulin. So now you don't have to have a high insulin response to decrease your blood glucose. It's so beneficial in so many ways. And you can do that through this high intensity exercise. And people don't understand that. I mean, but this is reality. I didn't make this up. This is physiology. This is physiology textbook stuff. This ain't Dr. Ben telling you a story, okay? And so it's so beneficial that I think not to do it is a little bit irresponsible. That's what I tell the practitioner.
Man, I couldn't agree more. Man, Dr. Ben, this has been one of my absolute favorite conversations I've ever gotten to have on the show. Um, I love that I messaged you to see if you wanted to come on here, and you were like, "Yeah, call me." And I was like, "Call you? Who calls anybody? It's 2024. I gotta just ring you up, and we gotta have a conversation." And got you on the show, and it's been wonderful. I can't wait to see you in person again. I can't wait for your presentation. That's going to be wonderful. I would love to host you on the show again. We didn't even talk about the rep and the mitochondria and talk nothing about nutrition. It would be fascinating to get you back on to talk about that one day. But I think
Yeah.
this is going to give our listener an amazing idea of what exercise actually is and how to get the best benefit. And I agree with you. I forgive the practitioners who are ignorant of this. They don't know about this, so they're not telling their clients, because I was not taught this either. I had to find this in a different way. But once you learn this, I agree. I think it's malpractice to not share this kind of training, even though somebody might be training less frequently with you as a trainer. Like it's the best thing to do to get somebody on less frequent, really effective training. And you have explained everything so clearly and so well. Absolutely love it. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you in your work?
Um, Actually, I don't want to be a wise guy. Um, I'm not looking for people to. I mean, I would certainly like to help anybody I can, and hopefully these kind of presentations help. Um, Dr. Benbow at hotmail.com is that's my email. Okay, and I try to answer all my requests and things. Sometimes if you request something from me or ask me a question, and you don't hear from me within like a week or 10 days, contact me again because sometimes I lose these emails. I'm an old guy and I don't know what the hell I'm doing on a computer. And just, but in any case, I try to answer as many as I can. Um, and you can get a hold of me there. You can go to Low Carb USA and see all my presentations. I'm on YouTube, which I didn't even know I was on until about a year and a half ago. I think I have about 50 YouTube things, and I don't even know how to get to them myself,
Wow.
but you can go there, I guess. And that's about it. I've got a book I didn't tell you. This is my book on longevity. I started writing this book. It's about the benefit of strength for longevity, basically. And the name of the book, this is for real, is Get Strong, Live Long, and Die Laughing. Okay.
Ah, man, I love it.
So, get strong. It's very beneficial. Have a good outlook on life. And when you've done this, you've lived a good life. When it's time to go, you go. You don't sit around for 8 years drooling into a bucket. It's time you go. So that's
Man,
what that's about.
I love that. What an appropriate title for the book. And we started this conversation off with a joke anyway. So I absolutely love that. Dr. Ben, thank you so very much for everything you've done. And thank you for taking the time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
All right, kids. See you soon.
We'll see you soon. And
All
this
right,
has
kids.
been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.